So Congress left town last Thursday for a 2-week break. So not much to report in U.S. politics this week, specifically with Congress. However, there's a little bit to cover. One of those things is Taiwan. So reporting from NBC News and The Independent state that Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen met with a bipartisan congressional delegation yesterday at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California. The meeting marked the highest profile encounter between U.S. and Taiwanese leaders on American soil since the end of formal diplomatic relations in 1979. Speaker Kevin McCarthy promised the Taiwanese president unwavering support for Taiwan. If only he would have that same unwavering support for Ukraine. I guess, though, that the Republicans really want to take on China a lot. They want to do some fighting on China on this one. But yeah, we're gonna see what happens here. But let's continue. The meeting reaffirmed American support for the Taiwanese government and emphasized the importance of continuing arms sales and economic cooperation with Taiwan. In her remarks, Tsai noted that the importance of a relationship between the United States and Taiwan, adding the presence and support of the delegation during her trip would, quote, reassure the people of Taiwan that we are not isolated and we are not alone. Now, why do we have this relationship with Taiwan? Well, it sticks in the craw of China, so that's a big one. But more importantly, it is the fact that Taiwan has integrated itself into the international economy, specifically with computer chip manufacturing. We've reported on this program before that the chips manufacturing that Taiwan does is the best in the world. And if China were ever to get complete and total control over Taiwan and its chip manufacturing, it would put America and anybody else at a comparative disadvantage, especially if those chips were not allowed to be exported from Taiwan, or if those chips that are used in high-grade military equipment fell into Chinese military's hands, and thus improving their capabilities to fight the United States. Over the last 60 years or so, part of the primary focus of the U.S. has to maintain asymmetry military advantage with the rest of the world. And part of that has come around due to the chip revolution that started around the 1980s with condensing chips to put, at this point, it's billions of transistors onto a tiny, tiny little chip. The chip in your computer has more processing power, more transistors on it than the computers that sent man to the moon. And those things are used in guidance munitions, satellite technology, and pretty much any kind of communication equipment that we have in the entire world. So that is primary why the United States is worried about Taiwan. Also, why the United States passed the CHIPS Act, and why we are trying to bring chip manufacturing back to American shores. How that will go and whether or not it will be good, or whether it will be good if it happens, but how good it being will depend on how much infrastructure is built and how many manufacturing plants are created in the United States. But we have to continue on. Now, China, for its part, responded by staging warships in waters around Taiwan and warned of resolute action. Saber rattling, gotta wag the saber, gotta show that they're gonna fight for their right to keep Taiwan in their orbit. And, it's to be expected. I mean, China has built fake islands across the South China Sea and all the like. So this is to be expected. And China, over the last 20 or 30 years or so, has established a large contingent of highly nationalistic people in its country in order to fomen's the wrong word. Foster, that's a better word. In order to foster a more devote population to the CCP. And so if they don't respond with military saber rattling here, then, well, they could actually piss off their own people and maybe lose a little control. That's why we're seeing this. And thank you, Provo. Appreciate you. Yeah, this is what we do. So good that you're liking it. Now, for Taiwan's part, Taiwan's Minister of Defense said this morning that the 3 warships were detected in waters separating the island from mainland China. The Defense Ministry also said that an anti-submarine helicopter had crossed the island's air defense identification zone. The air defense identification zone is like, let's see, how to describe this. So, so many miles off the coast is where Taiwan is, like, if China comes here, because Taiwan's really close to China, right? So if a ship or any military kind of thing, so helicopters, planes, ships, whatever, enter that territory, cross that line, that is considered its identification zone. And that is where it goes on to possible alert should anything pop off. I don't know exactly where it's at, like how many nautical miles it is from the shore, but that is what they're talking about here, just to give you some clarity. Continuing on, though, earlier on Wednesday, Taiwan said that it was keeping a close watch after a Chinese aircraft carrier was also spotted off the Taiwan coast. China views any interaction between the US and Taiwan as a challenge to its territorial claim of the island and breaking the One China policy. It also staged war games around Taiwan last August after then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taipei. In a statement today, the Chinese Foreign Ministry promised to take resolute and effective measures. Quote, in response to the serious, erroneous acts of collusion between the United States and Taiwan, China will Let's start over. Quote, in response to the seriously erroneous act of collusion between the US and Taiwan, China will take resolute and effective measures to safeguard national sovereignty and territorial integrity, the Chinese foreign minister was quoted as saying by the Global Times. Continuing on, quote, the Taiwan issue is the core of China's core interest and first red line in the Sino-US relations that cannot be crossed, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said. Finally, quote, Taiwan's independence is incompatible with cross-strait peace and stability, and it is a dead end. Now, this all from a Chinese perspective, from a very Chinese perspective, especially from the CCP, this all makes perfect sense. Taiwan has always been a part of China. After the Chinese Civil War, shortly after World War II, the communists routed the nationalists, and the nationalists went to safety in Taiwan, right? So that's the Nationalist Party of China. And they both claim to be the one true representation of China, right? As far as international relations are concerned. However, due to the Communist Party's effective use of military force in World War II and after World War II, talking about Korea and, not so effective. It was in Korea, it was effective, but not so effective in Vietnam. Everybody recognized the Chinese Communist Party as being the one true representation of China. But because of China's tenuous position in world order and its need to kind of integrate itself as well as shape the entire Chinese population to be more Chinese communist or whatever you want to call what they are, they couldn't make a full military effort against Taiwan, especially after the United States helped bolster it as an independent country. Although it's not considered an independent country, for all intents and purposes, it is self-administered, it runs itself, it has its own military, it does global trade outside of the Chinese government's will. It is for all intents and purposes a separate country, right? So that's how we got to this where we are. That's how they're able to be the manufacturing hub for computer chips in the world, as well as other manufacturing goals, and how it has representation in various international bodies to some extent, as well as, basically running its own affairs. China, for its part, has not tried yet, anyways, to directly influence Taiwan through military might or taking over and things like that. What they have done is they have gone into Taiwan, set up spies, they've set up non-government organizations, they've fostered communist parties inside Taiwan and other political parties that are more favorable to China. And those parties have won elections and increased, relations with China and other things. So what we will likely see, at least for the time being, is that to continue on, as well as China to try to influence its neighbors. So we're talking Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, Australia, Vietnam. What else? A lot of the countries that surround China that are Western focused. They'll also try to influence those countries to be more amenable to what China wants, and that includes trying to influence politicians to be like, well, Taiwan probably should just be part of China fully. Now, but for their part, the White House was careful to walk a delicate diplomatic line ahead of Ty's visit, reiterating that the trip was perfectly routine and consistent with the U.S.'s policy toward Taiwan amid deteriorating relations between Beijing and Washington. But China doesn't see it that way. And, from their perspective, it is a reasonable position. I actually would say it's a reasonable position. But I also say that it is not a reasonable position for China to just it's a reasonable position for China to want to take over all of Taiwan, but it's not a moral one, given that Taiwan has been effectively an independent country for the greater part of 60 years.